Hello, my name is Nala Anderson, and my presentation will be on facing oppression and diversity. Now, oppression does come in many different forms, such as equality of civil rights, gender rights, poverty struck, and healthcare availability, as well as religious practice. Now, in the short film called Taking Roots, you were introduced to Europeans who began to settle in the late 1800s. When they settled into Kenya, rivers flowed and trees of all sorts flourished. As the population grew of colonies, they began to cut down and burn more trees, which caused the rivers to dry up. By the 1970s, there was a major decrease in soil, no firewood, decreasing water sources. Land mainly was used for cash crops like tea and coffee. Without firewood, the Kenyan people, did not have the energy to reduce the rich, nutritious meals of their culture, which left their young ones more vulnerable to a lot of diseases. Culture changes when British settlers arrived. They weakened the culture infrastructure as far as pushing Christianity onto them. So when the elders died, so did the culture. Now, in the TED Talk called Let's Talk About Intellectual Disabilities, featuring Miss Loretta Claiborne, who was an African American, and she was one of seven children who grew up during the segregated times. Her mother was a welfare recipient, which also put her into a social class of being oppressed. Because during that time, if you were in a lower class, you weren't able to get the quality education, you weren't able to get the good health care. So she was also intellectually disabled, which means she wasn't able to learn as fast as others, and she was already written off as not being able to learn as fast as other kids. Their stepfather and his parents, well, his stepfather and his mother, they lived way beyond and below the poverty line. Because he had to stay home to help take care of his siblings, he was not able to go to school. And the reason why he stayed home was because his mom could not afford the care as far as his younger siblings, so he had to stay home and babysit. College was not an option for Gomez, even though that was something that he dreamed of doing because of his social class. Living in poverty was holding him back, and his family was in a cycle of poverty. Adversity in the face of diversity. Now, in the videos and article that I mentioned, these groups did not have power. The positions they were in was chosen for them. They suffered marginalization and alienation, not fitting in and being viewed as less in society. The culture and living changes in Kenya from taking roots being disinstitutionalized. From Loretta Claiborne being born with a disability and being labeled as different and incapable, cognitively challenged. And then there's Gomez, who was born into poverty, and the option of getting out is not presented. Relative poverty. From oppression to liberation. Empowerment of people with intellectual disabilities and women activists. Wangara was a 2004 Nobel Peace Prize, but in 1977 she created the Green Belt Movement, which her and a whole bunch of other women, the Women's Council of Kenya, began to plant trees, which helped them reestablish forestry in Kenya and helped to provide food and shelter for thousands and thousands of people in Kenya. And Loretta Claiborne, she was written off as a misfit and not going to become nothing in life, and she ended up with two doctorates, and in 26, I believe, Special Olympics, being able to compete in that, and even spoke in front of the U.S. Congress. Oppression doesn't mean the end. Oppression is something that you can arise from, which we see in Loretta, and also in a more realistic non-textbook insight of facing oppression in the midst of adversity and diversity.